In the early days, the lab investigations, the other tests were used as a mean to only confirm your diagnosis. But today, we base our diagnosis upon the results of such lab investigations and tests. How important it is to make a correct diagnosis to prescribe a homeopathic remedy. Let's see what our literature says.
We often hear that homeopathy treats the patient and not his disease. It simply means we do not treat asthma, arthritis, or migraines, but instead, we treat a patient having asthma, arthritis, or migraine. Now, that arises an important question: how important is it for us to make a correct diagnosis for selecting the right Similaman? Let's read from the literature. Except in a few acute diseases, no diagnosis can be made, and no diagnosis need be made, except that the patient is sick. The more one thinks of the name of a disease, so-called, the more one is beclouded in the search for a remedy. For then, the mind is only upon the result of the disease, and not upon the image expressed in symptoms. To understand these statements better, let's consider the totality of a case of the patient having asthma or breathing difficulty. Now, if we repertorize this totality, arsenic album will emerge out as the Similaman. Now, for the same patient, let's imagine that skin eruptions was the complaint, and the totality as shown. Now, with this totality, again, arsenic album would still emerge as the Similaman. So, it's clear that the disease ultimates do not decide the remedy, but it's the symptoms of the patient that guides us to the right Similaman. Asthma, migraine, arthritis are not the disease, but the disease ultimates. Let's quote from the literature.
It must be clearly settled what it is in man that is first, and what is last, what is highest, and what is lowest, what is innermost, and what is outermost, before we can perceive what are causes, and what are ultimates. So long as one thinks of pathological conditions as causes, so long will he act in directions that are the opposite of healing, and toward destruction. To cure the results of disease, the ultimates, we must be guided by the symptoms that represent causes, and first periods of developing sick constitutions. The man who waits for pathology to guide him to a remedy for a constitutional sickness is most unwise. It must be understood, however, that the diagnosis does not reveal the nature of a disease in a manner to image a remedy. The diagnosis is the name of ultimates and exteriors, while it is the interior nature that must be perceived through the peculiar characterizing signs and symptoms in order to discover the remedy that will cure.
Under traditional methods, it is necessary that a diagnosis be made before the treatment can be settled, but in most cases, the diagnosis cannot be made until the results of disease have rendered the patient incurable.
तुम्हें यहाँ कुछ महीने पहले आना चाहिए था.
Homeopathy do not completely rule out the importance of making a correct diagnosis. Literature further says, physical diagnosis is very important in its own place. By means of physical diagnosis, the physician may find out the changes in organs, how far the disease has progressed, and determine if the patient is incurable. It is necessary also in supplying information to boards of health. It may also decide whether you should give curative or palliative treatments.